So you're in your 20s, and you're alone. Now what? Being in your 20s is like stepping into a world that feels both wide open and kind of uncertain. It's a time when you're figuring out who you are, like slowly piecing together a puzzle with no picture on the box. Some days you'll feel totally free and excited, like there are endless possibilities. Other days, though, you might feel a little lost, wondering if everyone else somehow has it all figured out while you're still working it out. The friendships you had growing up can start to shift, and sometimes that feels lonely. People are all moving in different directions, and while it's natural, it can be hard to handle. But in these moments, you learn what truly matters to you, and little by little, you find people who understand where you're coming from. Your 20s are full of discoveries, like what makes you happy, what feels right, and what kind of life you want to actually build. It's okay if things feel messy or if you're not quite sure where you're headed. Being in your 20s isn't about having all of the answers. It's about learning, growing, and figuring out in a way that makes sense to you. Being in your 20s is hard, especially when you feel alone. I don't really have that many friends. I have one best friend who lives 7 hours away from me, and that's probably the most important friendship that I will ever have in my whole life. I feel like I really fantasized about college the most when thinking about my 20s, and I had such high expectations, and I thought I was going to form this amazing friend group and have all of these amazing friends that I would be surrounded by 24/7, like I saw in the movies when I was little. And then I got to college and I met like 2 people my whole first year, and I only hung out with one of them. I feel like when you're a kid, you have all of these expectations and fantasies about what it's going to be like when you grow up, what it's going to be like when you're finally in college or in your 20s. And then you get there and it's not exactly what you think it's going to be like, at least for me. I didn't really form any connections with many people, simply because it's hard to make connections, especially when you're shy and you're the quiet one, and you have all of these insecurities that people don't really like you, or that people don't really want to be your friend or be around you. I feel like I got to college and it felt like I was just on the outside looking in, and I was comparing myself to all of these other people around me and all of the other girls in my dorm room who would hang out with each other or who would go out on the weekends, and I would feel like there was something wrong with me, and I couldn't understand why it seemed so easy for everyone else and why it was so hard for me. For the first time, I was in a place without any familiar faces, and I was overcome with this overwhelming sense of loneliness. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by people who didn't know me, who didn't grow up with me, and who didn't understand me, and I couldn't figure out a way to make people understand who I am, because it's hard for me to share myself with people who I don't really know. This video isn't really about how to make friends, because at that point in my life I don't really know the answer to that, but I kind of hope this is more of just a gentle reminder to you that you don't have to have things all figured out, and your life does not have to look like what you see on TikTok. Life is so beautiful, and although it's fun to do things with other people and it's fun to have friends to go explore with, to party with, to just hang out with, it's not necessary. You can live a beautiful life by just experiencing the simple things every day by yourself. I feel like so many of us feel that sense of loss when we're growing up, and a lot of us feel lonely, especially within our 20s. And your 20s can be a lonely time. People move out, people get new jobs, people go to big cities. It's normal to feel alone. You're changing and you're growing and you're evolving, and sometimes you need periods of loneliness to really appreciate the times when you're not alone. If you feel such a strong sense of loneliness and you feel so alone in this feeling, I just want to let you know that you're not alone, because I and so many other people also feel that way. Being lonely is so normal, and comparing yourself to what you see online or comparing yourself to people that you once knew will only do more harm than good. And going into a period of self-loathing and feeling a sense of jealousy is normal, and that's fine, but don't let that jealousy consume you. Use it as a motivating factor to strive for a life that you really want and that you really desire. Don't feel like you're running out of time if you feel like you haven't formed that solid friend group yet, or you haven't made those deep connections yet. Anything can happen at any time, and just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
okay to feel like life is messy right now, because honestly, that's just part of figuring out what works for you. There's no rush, no checklist to complete. You're allowed to take things at your own pace, to not have all the answers, and to even feel a little lost along the way. This is all a part of growing into who we are, even if it doesn't feel easy. The loneliness you might feel doesn't make you any less lovable or any less capable of finding connection. It's all just a part of this journey that we're on.